So I'm looking at the edit notes for Recipe for Change, and I see DeMira Pierre. I'm like, who is this? She's on point. Yes, I would have said that too. Right?
So now I'm like, I'm really talking to people at Google. What? I didn't know if she liked me or didn't like me. All I know is that, I'm showing up. I know I got a short amount of time to do this, so I got to do it fast and I got to do it quick and I have to be effective. So they wanted to make sure that they had the right Black person.
Hey, everybody, it's Maureen Aladdin, and this is my podcast, Weighing In on the Way In. You'll have to forgive me because mom life, I have a toddler, and this is just what happens. I didn't realize that you can get, all the germs. And it is now 2023. I started my podcast in 2020 during the pandemic, and then I took a pause for whatever reason because life. And this guest that I have today is the reason I am back. And also the reason I am back via video. I usually do this just via audio, but it's now front facing. So let me do the real introduction, what this podcast is all about. It's called Weighing In on the Way In, and I speak to dynamic women behind the scenes in the entertainment industry and find out everything they did and didn't do to land their current career position with an emphasis on current, because let's face it, we evolve, we move on, and we lean in closer to a purpose-driven life. And so with that, I'd like to introduce my first guest of 2023, Miss DeMira Pierre, who I know through YouTube. She is an accomplished producer and executive. She's worked with BT Networks, Buzzfeed, Headspace, and YouTube. Over at YouTube, she was a creative executive, impact, and racial justice, and she led the efforts of YouTube's BVF, their Black Voices Fund, a company-wide initiative for racial justice, equity, and product inclusion. She is the founder of Divine Media Group, a boutique production company, talent management, and production. She has consulted on television series, podcasts, branded content. She specializes in creative development and production execution. She is a pioneer, which we're going to get to, in establishing online radio, what we're doing right now, podcasting. And her focus is on content innovation, broadening success measurement, and most of all, she loves Jesus.
Yes, I do.
Hello. Welcome to the show.
That is true.
Welcome to the show, DeMira.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad that this was the kick in the butt to get you back going. And I'm happy to, be an inspiration wherever I can, man. So I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back on the ones and twos. So welcome back.
Thank you. Where in the world are you right now? Since we're on video, where are you?
Currently, in this present moment in time, I am in Atlanta, but I'm based in Los Angeles. So I've been here for about a month now. I decided to kind of, I had some time. I'm like, you know what? Let me see what all the hype is around Atlanta. Everyone talks about how great the city is, and I've come here for work and only stayed a couple of days, but I'm like, let me see what I'm missing out on. I am ready to go back home. Back home to LA.
Why? What happened?
Nothing happened. It's all about preference and what you're into, right? So far, I don't have any conclusions, but what I've drawn is that if you are into partying and nightlife and all that fun stuff, then Atlanta is a great place. The entertainment scene is fine, but, coming from LA, I might be a little biased, but until these mainstream people with influence and power decide that Atlanta is the next place, the entertainment community and the offering is very small in terms of what it has to offer. But yeah, Atlanta is great, man. It's a great city, a lot of interesting people. Just like any big city, it's gonna have its pitfalls, but specifically, I'm an LA girl through and through, born and raised. I'm like, sorry, there's no place that's better.
Tell me what you love about LA.
Okay, so I am born and raised in Los Angeles, specifically Compton, California. I am one of Compton's finest. I know you guys
City of Compton.
heard about the Kendrick Lamars and the Dr. Dre's and the Ava DuVernays and all those fun people, but I am one of Compton's finest that has yet to get my acclaim here, but I'm working towards some things. So yeah, born and raised in Compton, lived in LA all my life. Story, Black girl, single parent household, but for whatever reason, I was selected to kind of beat the odds, and I don't take that lightly. Like I always tell people, like, I'm from Compton. I was born and raised in Compton, but my experience wasn't what people expected to have been. When I get in rooms with people, like I can talk the language, but don't forget it. I am a Black girl from Compton, right? And so my experiences are very diverse when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, like, y'all gonna know what's up.
I love it. So that means that whenever you get into a room, you jump in as your authentic self.
Yes. So I've had a long career. I've been working in entertainment for about a little over 10 years now. Your mentors tell you have to show up a certain way and do a certain thing. I did that. I played the role and I was like, not it. Like, what people should know about me is I'm an easy read. Like, what I'm thinking at all times because it shows up on my face. And I am unapologetically me. If somebody asks me a question about how I'm feeling, like, I'm going to tell you the truth. Like, for whatever reason, God did not make me in a way to like be sugarcoating stuff. I mean, I've gotten better as, time has progressed, but I'm going to tell you what it is. I've been able to show up authentically me by fire because I was in a situation where I was like trying to be something that I wasn't. And it was like, yo, this is not going to work out for me. And so from that particular situation, I was like, you know what? All I can do is show up and be who I am. And if that's not enough, then this is not the space I need to be in. So from that point on, like, all I know is how to be real. And
I
if
love
it's
that. I'm glad you said that because I was actually going to ask you, well, what got you to that? Because so many people struggle with just as Black people, we can code switch. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? And we're one way in a room and another way when we're with our people. Sometimes it's like that's exhausting.
it is exhausting, but I think that not just Black women or Black people, I think we're all like layered, right? And multifaceted, and we can kind of be chameleons and fit into where we need to fit in based off of who we are, right? And so in this particular instance, I was at a job and I wanted to leave my job so bad. I was at BET and I started at BET as an intern and worked my way up and through the ranks. And like when you stay at a certain place for a certain amount of time, they only see you for, how they see you. And it's like, I got to get out of here. Like, I've had enough. Like, I want to do something different. Like, I love Black people and Black content, but there's a little bit more that I want to do. And so I was so anxious to leave the job that I had at BET to where there was an opportunity that presented itself for me to go work at another company within Viacom that they had just acquired. And I was like, that's it. This is my chance. I didn't do the due diligence in terms of like really vetting what the opportunity was. And instead of me vetting what the opportunity was and if it was, if it was going to benefit me, I was just like, let me show up how I should show up to get this job. In the interview, it was so funny. Like, that was the first sign. Like, in the interview, I go to the office and they have dogs running around the office. And it's not a big office. It's like a startup, it's small. And I'm like, oh, they got animals up in here. And I'm not afraid of dogs. I'm not. But I just feel like, dogs have fur for a reason. They should be outside. So they had the dogs in the office, and I'm going through the interview process, and one of the questions they asked me was like, "How do you feel about animals in the workspace?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm fine." Lying through my teeth, I was not fine. It was not okay. So
Uh-huh.
that was one example, right? So I'm going through the interview process, I know off the bat, like this is not going to be good, but whatever. I wanted this job so bad. So anyway, get the job, and the job itself, like had I been in my authentic self, I could have read through the lines and been like, you know what? My skill set and my experience is a little bit beyond what this job is. So I get the job and I'm doing the job and am like, this is not what I signed up for. Like literally. And I was praying to God, I was like, God, I just want to grow and like I just want to excel. I just want to, I want to get to the next level of my career. And so I'm in the job and I'm like, this sucks. Like it was the worst experience of my life. And before then, I've never had an issue at work. I've never had anything to where people were like, oh, DeMira's not a good worker. Like my reputation preceded me. People knew like if DeMira was on the project, it was going to be good. So for me to be struggling within the job, I was just like, it kind of challenged my identity of like how I found worth and value. And I was like, wait a minute, like who I am and the work that I do, like this isn't me. So instead of the growth that I wanted professionally, I got it characterized because I was in a situation that I couldn't change. I couldn't fix it. Like I just had to go through it. And my worst nightmares came to fruition, which was being terminated, right? And I'm like, I've never been fired from anything. Oh my God. Like, Lord, I remember I was in the bathroom. I was like, God, I asked you for growth. This is not what I wanted. This is not what I expected. Long story short, like the job culture, the situation, like it was toxic. And, I got my, redemption because corporate got involved. And it was like, it's not you, it's them. Like, you're fine. Like, you're not terminated. This won't go on your record or anything. Like, you can always come back. But in that situation, I learned a few things, right? Like, always show up and be truthful to who you are. Like, I knew the very day when I interviewed and they're like, "Oh, do you have a problem in the office with dogs?" I should have been like, "Yes, I do." Like,
Wait, what was your role at that job?
so I was a coordinator, a channel launch coordinator. So this
Okay.
particular company was a streaming company. And so what I thought I was doing was being a bridge between getting content and making content partners and finding good content to put on the platform. But what I was actually assigned to do was actually do the logistics of like doing the logs, doing the metadata, doing like all the stuff that had nothing to do with being creative at all, being
Right.
creative or building relationships. I'm like, this is a lie, y'all tricked me. In that moment, it wasn't about career growth, it was about character growth. It was a few things that I took away out of that situation. It was like, don't lie, be authentic to who you are. If there's something that's raising alarms that you like, wait a minute, I'm not good with that, that's fine. Like, you could say no, right? So that was that. And then the other part of it was like, sometimes we get into situations to where it's not going to change. It's not going to change. The only thing that you can change is your attitude in the situation, right? Like,
Yeah.
God didn't change anything. He didn't send me another job. And believe me, I was calling everybody I knew. And no, like the worst thing happened. Like, I got terminated
Right.
and I had to fix my attitude in the situation. It's like once my posture changed, then things changed. And I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, we gonna all go through something. It reminds me of, is it the three Hebrew boys, right? When they put them in the fire, it was like, God, like, why'd you let them go through the fire? Like, that's messed up, right? Like, we gonna go through the fire. Like, he never
Yeah.
said that we not gonna go through the fire. It's how you act in the fire is what he's looking at, right? And when you come out, you be like, oh shoot, I didn't even get burnt. I don't even smell like smoke. Nobody even knew that. The whole situation was terrible. It was fine. And then, it's just like how you act in your posture is what's important. And then the third thing is like, at the end of the day, you always end up where you're supposed to be. Like, looking back at that now, like, I needed to go through that experience because had I not gone through that experience, it wouldn't have gave me the opportunity or the tools to be able to work at a YouTube or a Google. Because at that point, like, I was pivoting from traditional tech or traditional entertainment into this tech world of entertainment. And that job literally was the catalyst for me to be able to pivot into like this tech world and do media and all that stuff.
Let's rewind a little bit. I want to hear about what your journey was toward getting to like a YouTube and a BT and et cetera, et cetera. Like, where did you start off? Did you always know that you wanted to be in media?
No. No, this was not the plan that I had for myself. Let me tell you what my plan was.
Tell
So
us.
I went to school to do sports medicine and athletic training. Like, that was my goal, right? That was my plan. My plan was to go to school, get a degree in kinesiology, become an athletic trainer, work on one of these professional sports teams, maybe a basketball team, NFL team, find me a professional basketball somebody, boo rather, and like become an NBA, NFL
I
watch.
love how you squeeze that in there. You like, find me a little boo.
That was literally my plan. Like, that was my plan. Like, go to school, become a trainer, be a NBA jump off then turn wife. Like, that was the plan.
Wait,
And
I'm mad that you said jump off. Not
I
the
mean,
jump off.
whatever. That was cool back in 2000, early 2000s. Like, that was the thing. No, anyway, so that was my plan. So I started going to school, doing the classes, and like literally, like I was like, you know what? This ain't for me. Like, it's a no. Like, nah. 18-year-old DeMira knew what she wanted and what she didn't want. And I was like, this ain't gonna pan out for me. So I ended up dropping out and coming back home and was like, I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do. And I was working at a nonprofit that ran group homes, and I was the receptionist for the main office. And I remember the guy that owned the company. He would come in every day at like 10 o'clock, and he would be so happy. And like, I'm like, yo, like, what is this life? Like, there are people who are living lives that they are happy with. Like, they have jobs that they like. They Like I want to be that, right? And so I didn't know what it would be or how that would become, but because I've always been the person where I'm like, no, I want stability, I want a 401k, like I want benefits, like I'm not here for struggle. But people had always was like, you should do something in entertainment, like you have such a good personality, blah 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 blah. And all I knew was in front of the camera, like I didn't know that there was a such thing as a creative executive and people who made decisions. I didn't know that. So I'm sitting at my desk and I'm like, this is Craigslist. I'm looking for somewhere to live, by the way, on Craigslist. And I
Mhm.
come across this ad that says have your own radio show. And I'm like, oh man, like that sounds kind of cool. I've always loved radio. Like radio's been my thing. Like I'll always be the one that'll call in, win the tickets. Like I've always loved radio. So I'm like, man, a radio show, that could be kind of cool. So I, inquire about this radio opportunity and had my own radio show. So basically it was just a little small frequency, a little AM channel, like you can actually tune in on the actual radio. But then they had this other part of it, which was the online radio part of it, where people could log in, listen to the radio show on the website, and then I can download the episodes and like rebroadcast it. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I did that. That was my foray into entertainment, which was like me having my own radio show. And so
That's dope.
yeah, the premise of it was popping to the top with DeMira Pierre, where I would like highlight all these upcoming, artists and athletes around LA. Like everybody, like I've had some pretty dope people on the show who are now doing amazing things in their careers. But yeah, it's called Popping to the Top, and it was like, okay, let me be your first interview and like give you a shot, and you can say you was on the radio. So that was my show, was Popping to the Top. And then from there, like that allowed me to kind of start making a name for myself in this entertainment world where it's like, okay, I have something tangible where I can show people like, hey, I host, I produce, like this is what I've been doing. And then I would start doing like sideline reporting for like the Lakers. And then from there, I was able to start interning at Stevie Wonder's radio station in LA.
Nice.
And yeah, there was just like a snowball effect. And then how I
Just
ended.
from that little Craigslist post.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And my sentiment in it was, and I had to pay, like, I had to pay like $300 a month for like 4 hours of like airtime, right?
What age were you at? Were you like 18, 19?
I was like 22.
Where were you getting the 300 from?
Oh, so I was working my actual regular job as a receptionist,
Okay.
right? So
Okay.
that, and then, man, it's so crazy because I probably had like maybe 6 jobs at a time. Like I was doing that. I was
Wait,
working
U.S.
at like
Indian? I said
a
U.S. Indian because I'm Haitian, so I
yeah, yeah.
understand the multiple jobs.
Finish jobs is what substitute, what allowed me to be able to do that. And so
Yeah.
I looked at it as an investment in me, right? So I'm like, how can I expect people to invest in what I'm doing if I don't want to make the investment, right? If you telling me like it's $300 a month, all right, fine, I'm gonna sacrifice and I'm gonna do this because I believe in me. Like, what's $300 on me? I'm gonna spend it. And so from there, like it just kind of snowballed to where then people wanted to start sponsoring the show. And then I'm like, oh, okay, like I actually have a real business model here. So
Wow.
yeah, that's how that happened. And then that snowballed into me getting other opportunities to help other people produce like radio and stuff. And then what was crazy was I didn't realize that I had this skill set of like putting things together and like making things actually come like alive, right? I didn't know that that was a thing until I had met my mentor. Her name is Tammy Mack. She's a radio personality in Los Angeles. And I saw her doing her like one woman show and like her web series and stuff. And I was like, oh, like there's actual like titles and people who do these things. It's called an executive producer. Huh. And I would start looking at the credits of TV shows, right? So I would watch these shows and I'm like, oh, somebody had to make these shows come alive. So that's how I realized, wait a minute, there's people behind the scenes who are like doing actual real work. So I would start reading the credits of shows and start looking up people, and I start looking at people and start connecting with them on Twitter. And I'll reach out and be like, hey, like I love your work. I watch your show. Like, can you tell me more about what you do? And that's how I ended up like kind of getting into entertainment. Like people didn't know exactly what I did, but what they did know is that I was willing to help them do whatever they needed to do.
Yeah.
And they were in exchange, like I was literally like taking in information. And so like that's one of the gems that I tell people is like I can't give you the blueprint of how to break into entertainment, but what I can say is that people are never going to turn down help. So if you come to the table saying, "Hey, how can I help make your project better?" No one's going to be like, "Oh, you can't help me make my project better." They're going to be like, "Oh, okay, I need you to carry the camera. I need you to go get water. I need you to go do this." And in
Yeah.
exchange, it's like, okay, now you get access to, information that you wouldn't necessarily be able to attain because now you're like working like in a very intimate way with people to where it's like, I'm helping you do your stuff. And I kind of see how all these things are like working together. So that's how I've been able to like make a name for myself. Like people didn't know exactly what I did, but what they did know is that anytime I was around, like stuff got done and
Stuff
stuff.
got done. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's definitely about being of service to people in any way that you can. And then that's how you grow, and you grow as a better professional. You make your network becomes bigger. And so I was looking at your body of work today. I came across the first Sunday block party where you were interviewing Devon Franklin, who I actually know through Dr. Holly Carter. But like I'm watching you on the video and you like epitomize multitasking. Cause you're interviewing, then you have your papers, then you grab the book, and I see you EQing, and all of it is seamless. So I
Yeah.
don't know if it was difficult, but it was like I'm looking at this person here who's like operating in excellence, and I love that's one of the things that I love to say, like my tagline for 1218 Media, executing in excellence, which is from God. I love that you were just so on point, and I wanted to hear like how you got into radio, but you just told the story. So, but how were you able to do all of that? How did you get to that
Man,
point?
it's so funny because when I see like the landscape of podcasting and what it is, I'm like, had I stayed in that lane and like really doubled down on it, like who knows where I would be, right? Like I've probably had about 7 shows at this point, maybe even more in count. 7 shows that I've had on my own, a whole bunch more that I've helped produce. But how I've ended up where I've like been able to be in these opportunities is just really honestly God. That's the first thing. And then two is like just kind of keeping your ear to the street about like, okay, what's bubbling up? Like all of a sudden everybody's into this like AI, and I'm kind of like kicking myself in the pants because as you start to get older and you start to do stuff, you just kind of get a little jaded. You're like, it's always something new. But I think the thing for me is like for whatever reason, like I've been able to be on the like cusp or like the groundbreaking part of like the next thing. If I could go back and tell my younger self, like DeMira, like you're going to be okay, like stick to it and like just kind of block out the noise of like, because when I'm telling people I got an online radio show, people are like, "What are you talking about? Like that makes no sense, right?"
Yeah.
So
Ahead of
basically,
your time. That's what it was.
yeah, like, and I don't want to sound like arrogant when I say this, but I'll say this: when you're a trendsetter, you're always going to be trailblazing by yourself. So I've always been in a situation where I've been like a trailblazer and setting the trend. And when there's nobody else with you, you just kind of are like, "Am I? Wait a minute! Is this right? Am I tripping?" So that's how I've been able to kind of get and have these opportunities is that I'm always trying to figure out like, well, what's the next thing? I've never really been a part of the pack of what is popular. I've
Hmm.
always done my own thing and like moved to the beat of my own drum. And like that has like landed me in like these crazy scenarios where I've ended up working at like a YouTube and like BT and all these places because for whatever reason, I'm like, well, let's just do it. Let's just
Yeah.
see where we end up. And then to circle back, people always come back and be like, "DeMira, you were right." And I'm like, yeah, we could be millionaires. I know.
I want to ask you because I totally understand what it feels like to be ahead of your time. Like, there are so many projects that I've created where I was like, for instance, I did a web series on YouTubers. And when I brought it to networks, they were like, well, we don't know what to do with this. I also did, like, I pitched to Nickelodeon a kids cooking show. And literally, they sat down and told me, you can't have kids holding knives or being near stoves. Look at the gamut of kid shows. It's great to be ahead of your time, but how does that make you feel that, how you just said, like, we could have been millionaires? Because I kind of sometimes feel like, damn, I was ahead of my time and now they're doing this. And it's like, but I haven't really I'm not where I should be, like where they are right now. I should be there. So how
That's
do
a
you
good
deal with
question
that?
because I'm kind of in the midst of dealing with that now, like with the whole layoff thing and all that, right? Like I've
Mm.
made other people's projects better. I've done all these things to where I have enough credit in the industry to be like, oh wait, DeMira knows what she talking about. But in terms of like dealing with this kind of idea of like being ahead of my time and like really betting on myself, it really just kind of goes back to this concept that I hold to be true, which is, if God gave you the idea, then, he'll figure out a way to make it come alive, right? And so, especially when you talk to creatives, like, you can get very jaded. Like, you like, man, I've seen this idea, I've had this idea. Like, there's a show on TV right now where I wrote this. Basically, I wrote the Bible for the show when I was 15 years old. And I'm like, yo, this is the show that I've been trying to make for 15 years. But
What's the
it's
show?
really,
Can you tell us?
yeah, it's UnPrisoned, the Kerry Washington show. Like, that basically is like my life. Like, literally, like, verbatim.
Really?
Wrote like a little mini treatment for it when I was 15, shared it with a very prominent director in Hollywood. He kind of, it's like, I need some work, more work, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, it does need more work. That's why I'm asking you, do you want to help? So to see the show out, and I'm just like, that was my show. But I go
Right.
back to say that, like, no idea is new, right? There's no new ideas. Like,
Right.
let's just stop, right?
Yeah.
But what is new and what is different is the approach, right? So me and you can have the same idea, but we have a very different approach in how we do it. So you have to really double down on your approach and realize, like, wait a minute, this is the unique thing that I'm bringing to this idea or I'm bringing to the table is my approach. And it's not really on you to like sell yourself. It's really on God. I don't know, if you subscribe to whatever God or whatever spirituality, whoever's listening, you subscribe to, it's really on that to be like, all right, this is the time, this is the season, right?
Yeah.
So it's about divine alignment. Like, as long as you keep doing your part, like, the alignment and the timing is all going to happen when it's supposed to. And so I know that sounds easier said than done, but that's part of the trade-off is like, you keep doing the work, and whenever the work is supposed to come to fruition, like, you just kind of be ready. Like,
Yeah.
there are no such thing as like overnight success. Like, there's people who've been hustling and working and doing this stuff their whole life, but then all of a sudden you see them like pop and you're like, whoa, like, where did they come from? It's because they kept doing the work, right? And so it's easy to get derailed. It's easy to be like, oh man, like, I had this idea or that idea, but it's like, no, like, you really have to double down and be like, no, no, my approach to this idea is what makes it a success.
Unique. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. He said for anybody listening, it's a faith journey. This entire process of us getting to what it is that we want is a journey in faith, believing in yourself, and then whoever you subscribe to, that's like believing in God. I mean, I subscribe to God, period. Point blank. So it's so
Yeah.
crazy because like most of the conversations I've had with some of my guests, it's like we start talking about God. I'm like, I'm about to turn this into a faith podcast, but
Yeah, but that's the thing. I
it is
mean,
what it is.
it's what it is. I mean, because I honestly just feel like I serve the creator of the universe, right? So if that is the source, right, and I'm like saying I'm a vessel, then I'm not gonna run out of ideas. Like, I'm just waiting for the next one, right? So
Yeah.
sitting here waiting on the what next one is not sitting on my hands. It's me actually working and like, putting myself out there and be like, hey, like, I think this could work. And then hearing no or hearing like, it's fine. I'm like, okay, one day, like, y'all gonna start listening to me. And
Right.
so when that day comes, like, I just want to make sure that I'm ready and I'm prepared.
You did Recipe for Change at YouTube, and that's how I came across you. So I was a program manager I was at YouTube via ASG. You were actually at YouTube via Google. So different kind of hire, but same connection. So I'm looking at the edit notes for Recipe for Change, and I see DeMira Pierre, DeMira Pierre, DeMira Pierre. I'm like, who is this? She's on point. Yes, I would have said that too. I would have said that too, right? So I was like, that's how I connected with them. I'm so glad that I made this connection with you because I'm like, she's a force. I can tell. She knows what she's doing. She's passionate about what she's doing. And so I want to talk to you about how you got over to YouTube in the first place. What was that interview process like? That's a big title. I mean, creative executive, like,
I'm laughing because it's actually really And I hate to keep going back to this, but this is my story. Like, it was a God thing, right? So I'm at my former job, which is Headspace, and I'm like kind of running their podcast department or whatever. And it was, some points of contention that kind of came up, and it was a situation where, they loved my work, but they wasn't valuing what I was bringing to the table. Like, they was telling me one thing and doing another. And I am like, no, 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 no. We're not going to sit here and talk about how great my work is. Like, and either y'all going to bring me on full time or you not. Like, I'm not
Okay.
playing these games, right? And so that kind of kicked me in the direction to like start looking for other opportunities. Literally, it's so funny because I've had like anybody that's listening, like if you're in your career where you're like in that weird kind of space where you're going from like coordinator, manager level, it's like it's very hard, it's very weird because you're not entry level, but you're also not junior, but you're also not senior. Like it's weird. It gets weird. And so I remember I had tweeted something maybe like 2 months before I saw the listing for the YouTube job. And I was like, you know what? My favorite thing to do is apply for jobs that I don't qualify for on paper. So at that point, I started applying for like executive director jobs, vice president jobs, like SVP jobs, like just
Oh,
because I'm like, whatever. Like I will read the description. I'm like, yo, I can do all of this. Like like informally, I've been doing this for years. I just haven't had the opportunity on paper to say I had this title because we all know about equity. We all know about how, certain workplaces work. Like you just don't get the opportunities to have your actual work be formalized in a way of in a title, right? So I'm like,
right.
you know what? I'm going to apply for these jobs. So I seen the YouTube job and I'm reading the description. It says I needed like 15 years of experience, a senior level experience overseeing slates and programming for diverse TV and this, and that. And I'm like, I can do this job with my eyes closed. So I apply for the job. And it's Google, right? Like you hear about the bots and you hear about all these things or whatever. And so I tweaked my resume. I wish I could find the actual, I'm pretty sure I have it. But anyway, I tweaked my resume just enough or whatever. So I submit for the job, don't think anything of it. Like, all right, just one of the many jobs that I'm applying for that I don't qualify for on paper, right?
Yeah.
So then I get a email from an actual person at Google. It was a real person. It's a real recruiter.
Uh-huh.
Hey, we got your resume. Would you be interested in doing a 10-minute, screen to see if you are a fit for the role? So I'm like, what? I got past the Google bot. Oh my God, I can sell a talk. I do a TED talk about how to pass the Google bot. Like that was it for me. Like literally, I'm telling people I got past the bot. A real person reached out. Literally, you can ask anybody. So I'm like, all right, fine. I'll do the 10-minute screen with my recruiter. Shout out to Rohan. Anyway, talk to him. He's like, okay, well, yeah, you seem like a really great fit for the role. Like, I want to pass you along to
Wait,
the
wait,
hire.
wait. Were you nervous when you had the screen, or were you
No,
just like,
'cause remember, I'm just randomly applying for jobs.
right? So it's like you don't. Yes, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, no, I
I
didn't.
totally get that. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm like, all right, fine. So he's like, oh, I'm gonna pass you on to the hiring manager. I'm like, okay, great. So now I'm like, I'm really talking to people at Google. What? Like, you can't tell me nothing. So each time I'm like getting past these things. So I talked to the hiring manager who would then turn into my boss. So we have our first conversation. And that's the thing about me. I respect every opportunity. That is another thing. Like respect the opportunity for what it is. Although you don't qualify for something, respect the opportunity by showing up as prepared as you can be, regardless of if you think you qualify for it or not. Like respect the
Absolutely.
opportunity for what it is. So, I have my conversation with my manager who would then become my boss. It was a 10-minute conversation. I didn't know if she liked me or didn't like me. All I know is that, I'm showing up as my authentic self. Remember, because I went through that situation years ago where I'm like, I ain't lying to nobody. This is who I am. So I'm showing up. A week later, I get another phone call from same recruiter. Hey, she had a really great conversation. We want to formally put you into the interview process for this role. And he goes on talk about what the role is, how much it pays, and the whole thing. I'm like, okay, sounds good to me. So I have another interview. And so at this point, I started interviewing for that job in June of 2021. So from June of 2021 all the way through October, that was how long my interview process was from
Wow.
when they called me to when I accepted the job.
Wow.
So long story short, I had 8 rounds of interviews over a 4-month period. So each
That's
interview,
probably due to schedules too, though.
it was in the summer, so people were traveling.
Yeah, yeah.
But I wasn't talking to just anybody. Like for this specific role, like the title was Creative Executive Social Racial Justice Impact Programming. So it
Mhm.
wasn't just the TV side, it was also the impact work that Google and YouTube had committed to do in light of the George Floyd movement. And then they had that Black Voices Fund. So they wanted to make sure that they had the right Black person.
Right. Right. I mean, a lot of companies were doing that at that time, especially with
Right.
George Floyd
So I didn't
murder.
just talk to people on the TV side. I talked to people as high as up, basically the human rights activists that oversees all of the human rights stuff for Google. So like though that was my interview process, was interviewing with all these different folks from different departments of YouTube and Google, not to just make sure that I could do my actual job of making content, but it was about making sure I was able to have a sensibility around equitable inclusion and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm going through these rounds of interviews, and each time I would go through these rounds of interviews, I would get more and more authentically me.
I was
Because I'm
going to
like,
ask you, that's funny. Was there ever a point in which, throughout the 8 interviews that you were like starting to feel nervous as you got to certain people?
no, I didn't. It was
That's
funny
great.
because the higher up that I would talk to people, the more I felt more inclined to show them what they were getting.
I
Because
love it.
I didn't want to
I
be in
love it. Anybody who's watching, this is how you have to be. Just be
Yeah,
your
I didn't
unique
want to be
self.
in a situation where it was like, oh, I went to go work for Google and YouTube and it didn't work out because I was lying to people. Like, nah, I'm gonna tell you, like, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, this is what I don't know. It was a very candid conversation. And, some of those people, they had their feelings about it. So long story short, I'm interviewing for a job and I get a call from the recruiter. So at this point, I'm like turning down jobs. Like I was interviewing for a lot of different jobs and I turned down 2 pretty good jobs. And I was like, you know what? This is the big fish. I'm gonna hold out for the big fish.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm like, are other people going through this? Like, could it just be me? Did other people fall out? Like, what's happening? So anyway, they offered me the job. And one of the things that he said to me, which made me realize, like, one, this is the job for me, was there were other people who were more qualified, who had more experience, and that they wanted to pick. But it was just something about your approach and how fresh you were in terms of like how I thought about just stuff, that they were like, no, we need to have her. Right. So the stuff that I didn't have that they said they wanted in the description was the thing that got me hired. So I was like, oh shoot. And then the deficits that I had, they were like, you know what? Those aren't deficits. Those are things that, we're happy to work with you on. Like, that's part of the job. Like, we're happy to have you. Like, what you have to offer is more than what you don't have to offer. And then I was like, oh, shoot. So going back to the actual job itself, the specific role, I was like, this job was like tailor made for me because at the core of it, like, I want to help Black people. I like making TV. Like, it was like a unicorn of a job. But the thing where I knew that God's fingerprints was on it was the title, because in the title of the job was the word impact. I've always, from the very beginning of me starting to work in entertainment, like, it's always been my goal to like make an impact, right? In some sort of way. So for the word impact to be in my actual title, I was like, oh yeah, this is my job for sure. I remember I had did something because like they gave me all these like assignments and stuff. And so I had did something extra that they did not ask for. And that's what put me over the top of from the other candidates. And when I talk about respecting the opportunity, it's like show up and go hard or go home. Like
Yeah, yeah, and
either
you did exactly that. So I know it's taboo to talk about salary, and you don't have to divulge the exact
it's
amount,
never
but
taboo. Ask for what you want. Go ahead.
as for that's what I was gonna say. Like when you were at the negotiation table, did you leave anything? Did you first of all, did you know what you should be asking for?
It's so funny that you say that. So Google was like my first big like 6-figure job, right? Even when they told me what the scale was,
Same
I
here
said
for me.
that was completely, it was like not the range of what they had set aside for the job. I was like, oh shoot. I was like, oh yeah, I was just joking. Yeah, that's fine. So I'm asking people about their interview process, right? And then I'm also asking people about like, well, what happens when they offer you a job? Because the sentiment is you don't counter Google. Like you get an offer and you take what they give you. And because I'm like already like, well, this is kind of a whim anyway. Let me just see what I can do. So at that point, I had started talking to a financial advisor because it was language in the offer that I just didn't. I mean, I was anticipating, but I'm like, I don't know what GSUs are, blah blah blah. Like, I'm a black girl from Compton. Ain't nobody ever been balling like this in my family, right? So I'm like, I
What
don't
is
know.
the GSU? I don't know what the GSU is.
Oh, the GSUs are the Google stocks.
Oh, okay, got it.
Right, exactly. So if you don't know, you're like, this is like McDonald's money. This ain't real money. Like, no, I want my bread in cash money, which is kind of crazy because it's like, no. Take the shares. Take the shares.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm talking to a financial advisor and she's, kind of prepping me about certain things that I should be thinking about. So I get the offer. I tell her, I'm like, tell my mom, I'm like, I got the offer. I got the offer. And they're like, okay, like, are you going to accept? And I was like, no. I was like, I'm going to counter. And everybody was like, you're going to counter Google? I'm like, yeah, it's stuff in here that I think should be in there. Like, it wasn't a signing bonus in there. Like, I had heard, like, Google gives signing bonuses. I'm like, well, why they ain't give me one, right? So that was the first thing, was like, I want a signing bonus. And so that, and then I countered on the base salary. Like, I countered everything. I literally countered everything. The craziest thing is I countered everything, and not only did I counter everything, I asked for everything. I asked for them to pay for my cable. I wanted some swag. Like, I was asking for a whole bunch of stuff, and I was like, "Well, shoot, all you can tell me is no."
So you
So
had a rider. You
basically,
had the agreement, then you had your rider.
I did. And I didn't just counter frivolously, right? I did
Okay.
my research. So because of the role, and that's another thing too, like you have to do your research. Like if you're gonna counter, like you need to have something to stand on, because at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. It's about numbers and cents. Like as great as you are as a candidate, like if you don't have, like, the intangibles don't matter. So before I countered, what I did was I did research. One, I researched what the actual role was and what the comp was, and what the rest of the world was getting in this particular space. The second thing was like, okay, what are my tangible traits that I'm bringing to this role that they can't get anywhere else? The tangible thing that I was bringing to this specific role was that I had a 10-year long background of working with Black content, right? Because this is a very specific role and I have a very specific expertise, I need y'all to pay me very specifically for the tangible stuff that I'm bringing to this role.
Yeah.
So that was that. And then another part of it was, all right, well, let me see what the culture of this company is. You guys are telling me you guys have all these bonuses and all these targets, but like, are people actually getting it? So then I did research, and it's open public knowledge. I looked at the attrition rate of people at Google. Like, do they actually meet these targets? Do they actually get these bonuses? Come to find out, Black women at Google don't stay at the company long enough to get some of these long-term benefits. So that's how I made a case for me to get a sign-on bonus. It's like, all this sounds great. I want to be here for this amount of time to get all of these targets. But based on your numbers and the research that you guys have publicly let out, Black women aren't at the company long enough to get any of these benefits. And they were like, okay, and literally gave me everything that I asked for.
That's amazing.
So I say
That's how you do
this,
it. Hmm.
I said to say, when you're in negotiations and you talk about money, just like these people laid me off in January because it was beneficial to their bottom line. Oh, believe me, when I negotiated and got my money and did all the things at the beginning, it was like, all right, well, we had a mutually beneficial relationship for the time that we did work together. Because at the end of the day, like, you have to see yourself as a business. And I'm in the business of DeMira. So I have to do what's in the best interest of my business,
Yeah.
which is ask for the things that I need to have to feel comfortable to exchange my time, to exchange my resources, to exchange my time and my energy. Because at the end of the day, when y'all ready to let me go, y'all gonna let me go. But at
Yeah.
least when y'all let me go, I can be like, well, yeah, I got what I need
You
to
got
get.
what you needed from it. Yeah, I love it. So what exactly was the range?
I'm not telling you that.
You can't tell the range?
I can't.
But
No.
that's what I mean. Like people will not tell the range. Listen, there was somebody else that was at the time I was hired as a project manager.
Mhm.
And I had come off from being a producer in LA. It was like my first hire job as a producer. And I was making 80 for the year. And so when I came on as a project manager, I was like, I definitely can't make anywhere near 80. I have to make, above that. And so they gave me a little bit more above that. I was making
Mhm.
110. And I
Okay.
found out I could have been making way more than that. So then they let all of us go. They
Uh-huh.
let all of
Well,
us go.
is that so personally? Because I'm a very quiet person when it comes to that. Because one, I don't need people thinking what they know I have or what they
Yeah,
assume. But I'll just say this: the range that I was at was in the mid twos.
nice. Because my
So.
second range was closer to the top two when I
Mhm.
became a program manager. And that was my highest. And I know
Yeah,
that the next time I go anywhere else,
that was inclusive of everything, like all of the benefits, everything. It was in the
that's
mid.
great. That's amazing. Were you at a place where you were like, I got what I wanted. I did some amazing work. I made some great connections when that season at Google was over.
So this is what's crazy is I kind of had a false sense of security because I knew at some point that I would have the conversation, right? Because my role was rooted in a fund and the fund was set to run out at a certain point in time, right?
Okay.
So I knew I would have the conversation. I just didn't think I would have it when I had it in January. I thought I would have this. I would be in this situation next year, not here. I was very sad because I knew all the stuff that I had done, which was a lot in a year, and I knew all the stuff that I was planning to do, right? And I was just like, dang, like I didn't get to finish. But then when I look back on the work that I was able to accomplish, I emptied the clip, right? Like I was like, look, I don't know. I know I got a short amount of time to do this, so I got to do it fast and I got to do it quick and I have to be effective. So the
Yeah.
work that I was able to accomplish and I do, it takes away the sting of it because it was like, oh, this was like meaningful, impactful work and like you did it at a very large scale at a very high capacity, right?
Yeah.
So I say I'm sad about it because I mean, just knowing what I knew, I was like, oh man, like I had some more time, right? I was just getting started. But, I think I ran that job and I did what I was supposed to do in that job. The connections, the impact, the all the stuff that I set out to do, I did it in a year.
Yeah.
Now, if I had a little bit more time, it would be a little bit more impactful, but I don't control these things. But I will say this, I didn't sit on my hands. I didn't just sit and wait and take no for an answer. Like I was very like adamant about making sure that I held people accountable for the things that they said that they wanted to do. And y'all got the right one with me, okay? Because stuff came out when it was supposed to come out and people were reached the way that they were supposed to be reached. And I still have people hitting me up that was like, yo, like, thank you for writing for me. Thank you for getting me on this project. Like, I've been able to do this. I've been able to do that. And so those conversations are, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, my time wasn't in vain. Like, it was, I guess I had enough time to do what I needed to do when I needed to do it.
Where is DeMira going now?
That's a good question. It's part of why I'm in Atlanta. I'm kind of taking a little bit of a sabbatical to figure out like what's next. Because like once you work for like a Google and like and all these big high profile places, people expect you to do something amazing, right? And I'm like, well, what happens if I never do anything amazing? What happens if that was it, right? Am I personally okay with that? What's happening next for me? Honestly, I don't have an answer. I know that there's stuff that I want to do that are in the works that I'm excited about, but in terms of like next steps and I could be like this is what is happening, I do not have an answer. There are some things in the works that it's not that I can't talk about it, it's just that I'm like I've had things in the works for so long at this point to where I'm like, look, I'm tired of it being in the works. Like, I need this to come to fruition.
Yeah.
Always going to bet on myself. So there's some projects that I kind of have in the hopper that I'm working with, some production companies on that, I don't know. Only God knows the answers, but I'm doing the work. That's what's next.
Yeah.
Demira is still doing the work. Where am I going to end up? TBD. Who knows?
TBD.
Who
Well,
knows?
we talk a lot about, profession and on this podcast, but I also like to talk about, your personal life too. Like, where is DeMira in her personal life? Are you happy? Are you at a place where you feel at peace, or is there something that you want more personally for yourself? Like, and then we're
That's
gonna get into two more questions I have for you. I have a rapid fire, and then I want to circle back on something that you said. So I'm gonna let
okay.
you answer
So
that.
personally, it's so interesting that you said that. I had a therapy session before we started this. And I was just like, this isn't panning out the way that I thought it would pan out. But I didn't plan any of this for my life. So I'm kind of like torn because I'm like, man, like I have such a good life. Like I couldn't have planned it any better. And like one of the things that I've been living by for the last 2 years is like at this point, like I'm living in God's dream for me. Whatever that looks like I just want to be in position to be in that, right? So personally, I'm a little conflicted because I've had these high highs, right? And then I've had these low lows, and I'm just like, yo, like where is the balance? Like there's gotta be more to it than this. So, there's some stuff that I want, like community, friendships, family. I'm a very singular person in terms of like just kind of how I am because, when you are this type of person, like you're gonna rub some people the wrong way. And I don't mean to do it. I just am who I am. So it takes certain type of people to be in my life and to be in my world that get it. And so unfortunately, like I haven't found my people yet. So I'm just like, God, like, all right, like I'm waiting, like what am I doing? Like send me the people already because this life is getting a little lonely without the people. Like it's great to have all these high highs, but when I'm up there by myself, like what am I supposed to do? Right. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm in now is just trying to figure out. I'm not even figuring it out at this point. I'm just like, look, God, I'm here. Whatever you want to do with my life and whoever I'm supposed to be around and have community with, like, send them at this point because I've had enough of people be peopling, and I'd be like, oh, let me go back onto the house and lock the door and close the windows.
Yes, people be peopling.
Yeah, so personally, like I'm okay, but there's some stuff that I'm like toiling with that I'm just like, all right, God, like do it, please, like please do it.
I like that
'Cause
you're so rooted in him. I love that you like, even when you have your high highs, your low lows, you're still rooted in him in both places. And
well,
you
I
can
kind of have
tell,
to be.
yeah, you can tell that you trust.
I have to be because, like I said, like I told you what my plan was. I was gonna be a what? An NBA wife.
Keenan.
And that was my plan.
Yeah.
So my plans long ago stopped, right? So I'm
Yeah.
like, at this point, it's just me and you, Lord. Whatever you supposed to do, whatever life I'm supposed to have, like, there's three things that I know is that God doesn't lie, he doesn't take back what he said, and he's gonna do what he said he's gonna do. So I mean he got a winning track record with me so far. But right now I ain't gonna hold you. I'm a little antsy, like, excuse me.
He
But yeah,
needs you to have some patience, some more patience.
I'm like, how much more patience do we gotta have? Like, I think I got it.
Listen. All right. So you said earlier that the show with Kerry Washington, Unprisoned, you have written at 15 years old, and that you shared it with an exec. But when we talked about like your journey into the media world, you didn't mention anything at 15. So when were you like? How did you know what a treatment was, and also
No,
did you?
I didn't.
So
I
you
didn't
just
know.
wrote something. You happened to write a script, or like
Not
what
even
was
wrote
it?
a script. I wrote like a little outline character Bible. Now I know the terminology for it,
Yeah.
but me and my mom, like I was 15 years old. So my father has been in jail all of my life. So I'm like, man, like this could be like I'm not the only person who's living this life. And so at 15, I kind of had a layer of them. I mean, as I become an adult and understand like how things work, like, you kind of get it. But at 15, you kind of feel like, am I the only person that's experiencing this? This can't be. Like, no, no. So I'm like, man, this is a good story to tell about, a successful, woman whose father is getting out of jail. Like, because essentially, like, that's going to be my life at some point, right? I just wrote it like, oh, this could be a cool thing to watch. So I've had this little germ of an idea, and I've always kind of taken it with me in the back of my mind. And I'm like, I don't know how this germ of this idea is going to come to fruition or how it's going to work out, but whatever, I'll just keep it. And so as I started to start working in entertainment and seeing how things work, I was like, oh shoot, like this could be an idea. This could be it. And so when I think I was like a coordinator at BET. So at this point, I was probably at BET for like maybe 3 years or something.
Okay.
I always had this idea, obviously. And so I got an opportunity to talk to a very prominent director. I'm not going to say who it is.
That's fine.
And for whatever reason, he was like, inclined to talk to me and like on some like, cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I have this idea and I don't really know how to make it come to fruition, blah, blah, blah. And I shared the idea with him. And the thing that he told me that I got from that conversation was like, well, the reason why it hasn't come to fruition yet is because you haven't dealt with your truth of what this idea is. Meaning that there was still some work internally that I needed to do or go through or life that I needed to live. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's a great idea, but like you're writing it from an empty place.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, all right. And he was like, well, call me whenever you start doing the work. And that was 10 years ago. So I'm 32. So that was like 20, right? I didn't start doing the work until about 27. So I hit him back up, told him I started doing the work. He just kind of was like, brushed it off, whatever, right? So I'm like, man, forget him, whatever. So circle back to where we are now. I'm literally living in the work and the truth of what this story could be. So now I go back to this thought of like, oh, shoot. One, I'm not far off. Like, this is a story that should be told. So that gives me confirmation, like, I know what I'll be talking about. The second thing is like, okay, now that this story is being told, how is my approach going to be different? It's so funny how like God does things in my life. He confirms like, yes, you're right. Two, like you still have some work to do. But three, I'm gonna throw you a bone. And the bone is I actually have a production company that sees value in this particular story. But for whatever reason, I am at the center of the story now. It's not going to come to fruition in the way that I thought it would be, but it's actually going to come to fruition in the way that's completely like outside of what I would make it. I'm like, oh, this is okay. Well, I'm just going to sit back and watch and see how this all plays out.
Okay, DeMira, this is such a good conversation. So here's what we do. We always do like a rapid fire question or like, so you can only say one word, right? Choose one. You ready? All right. So get your hair done or do it yourself.
Get it done.
Makeup or natural face.
Natural face.
TikTok or IG.
IG?
Oprah or Michelle Obama.
Oprah, for sure.
Books or Chat GPT summaries.
Books?
Prose or poetry.
Poetry.
Okay. Working for yourself or working for somebody.
I would happily work for somebody else. Entrepreneurship is overrated. I don't know why people love it so much. It's kind of crazy.
It's got its moments. Working out or ice cream.
Ooh, right now working out.
Rest and relaxation or hustle harder.
Rest and relaxation.
Heck yeah. Sneakers or pumps.
Sneakers.
Pac or Biggie.
Tupac.
West Coast or East Coast living.
West Coast.
High school or college.
High school.
The Ellises or the Carters.
Can I like choose neither?
Yes, you can.
Neither.
Trading or real estate.
Real estate.
Insecure or Rappish.
Ugh. Neither one of those shows.
Jesus or Jesus?
Jesus.
Jesus. DeMira, thank you so much. You are such a pleasure. I am so inspired by you, and I think we have a lot more to talk about in part two. Share one more thing with me before we go. What are you most inspired by?
I like to tell stories that represent the underdog. So, those stories where people are being forgotten, right? Like, those are the stories that I think are important to share.
So, like, you see the face, peoples, but please tell them everywhere they
Now,
can find you.
this is sabbatical scaled down, by the way.
She's still beautiful. You said you
DeMira
did
in
choose
LA.
natural, right?
Yes, different face, but this is scaled down DeMira face. You can find me on Instagram at itsme_DDP. So it's me underscore DDP.
DeMira Divine Pierre, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Miss DeMira Pierre. Thank you so much for listening. Be inspired, live your best life, Trust your journey, and we'll see you next time around. Peace. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I appreciate all of you, and I'd love for you to subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.